Ever find yourself scrolling through old photos at midnight or having imaginary conversations with someone who isn't even in the room anymore? Why am I obsessed with my ex? It's a question that haunts so many people after a breakup, especially when you know logically that the relationship is over, but emotionally, you're still tethered to that person. It's not just sadness or grief, it's this persistent, looping thought pattern that keeps pulling your attention backward. You might notice it's affecting your sleep, your concentration at work, even your ability to connect with new people. And what's especially confusing is when you were the one who ended things, or when the relationship was clearly unhealthy, yet your mind can't seem to let go. The first thing to understand is that this isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. Neuroscientist Helen Fisher at Rutgers University has spent decades studying the brain in love and heartbreak. Her fair eye scans show that romantic rejection activates the same regions of the brain that light up during physical pain, specifically the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. These are deep reward centers that release dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter that gets us hooked on all sorts of things, from chocolate to social media likes. When a relationship ends abruptly, especially if it was intense, your brain is literally going through withdrawal. It's craving those dopamine hits it used to get from seeing their texts pop up, from their touch, from their smile. And just like with any withdrawal, your mind obsesses about getting another fix. But there's another layer here, beyond just brain chemistry. Attachment theory, developed by psychologist John Bowlby and expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, helps explain why some breakups feel like having a limb torn off. If you had an anxious attachment style, you might have learned early in life that love is unpredictable, that people come and go, that affection is conditional. Your nervous system stays on high alert, constantly scanning for threats to connection. When a primary attachment figure disappears, even if rationally you know it's for the best, your body doesn't get the memo. It stays in that hypervigilant state, obsessively thinking about your ex because on some primal level, it's trying to solve the puzzle of how to restore safety. The obsession is actually your nervous system's attempt to repair what feels like a life-threatening rupture. Then there's what psychologists call unfinished business. Research from the University of Texas shows that our brains have a strong preference for closure. We like things to be complete, resolved, tied up with a bow. When a relationship ends ambiguously, with unanswered questions or unresolved conflicts, your mind keeps returning to those open loops. It's like having a song stuck in your head that stops right before the final note. Your cognitive resources get tied up trying to complete the narrative. Was it something I said? What if I had handled that argument differently? Could we have worked things out if I'd given it one more month? This mental rumination isn't pointless worry. It's your brain's attempt to create coherence from chaos, to make sense of an experience that feels fundamentally senseless. Social psychologist Roy Baumeister's work on ego depletion adds another piece. When you're constantly monitoring your thoughts, trying not to think about someone, you're actually using up precious mental energy. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the more forcefully it pops back up. This creates a vicious cycle where trying to stop the obsession actually feeds it. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for willpower and decision-making, gets exhausted. And when that happens, you're more likely to give in to impulses like checking their social media or sending that late-night text. The obsession isn't just emotional. It's cognitively draining, leaving you with fewer resources to build a new life without them. Sometimes the obsession isn't about the person at all, but about who you were when you were with them. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's research on the somatic marker hypothesis shows how emotions get tagged to specific identities and life chapters. You might miss not just your ex, but the version of yourself that existed during that relationship. The more adventurous you, the more confident you, the you who felt seen and understood in a particular way. When that relationship ends, it can feel like that version of you died too. The obsession becomes a way to stay connected to that lost self, to preserve an identity that felt authentic and fulfilling. It's less about wanting them back and more about wanting that particular chapter of your life back, with all its associated feelings and possibilities. There's also what researchers at UCLA call the Michelangelo phenomenon, the idea that in close relationships, we help shape each other into our ideal selves, like Michelangelo carving David from stone. When someone has seen and reflected back your best qualities, their absence leaves a void in your self-concept. You're not just missing them. You're missing the person they helped you become. This is especially potent if you felt more creative, more compassionate, or more capable when you were together. The obsession represents your mind trying to reclaim that sculpted version of yourself, to find your way back to that feeling of being seen and valued in a particular way. There's actually a quiet, beautiful game built around this exact idea of self-rediscovery, a 3D sanctuary called Inner Phoenix, but more on that in a minute. Let's keep going first. So if all this is happening in your brain and nervous system, what can you actually do about it? The first step isn't to stop thinking about them. That's like telling yourself not to think of a pink elephant. Instead, psychologist Christine Neff's research on self-compassion offers a different approach. When you notice yourself obsessing, instead of judging yourself harshly, try saying to yourself, "This is really painful right now. It makes sense that I'm struggling with this." Recognize that your brain is doing what brains do, trying to solve a problem, avoid pain, create meaning. The obsession isn't a personal failure. It's a natural response to loss and uncertainty. This gentle acknowledgement alone can reduce the shame spiral that often accompanies obsessive thoughts, creating space for something new to emerge. Next, try what expressive writing researcher James Pennebaker calls writing to heal. Set a timer for 20 minutes and write continuously about the thoughts and feelings you're having about your ex. Don't worry about grammar or coherence, just let it flow. Research shows this kind of writing can reduce intrusive thoughts and improve physical health markers. The key is to not just vent, but to move toward meaning making. What did this relationship teach you about what you need? What patterns do you notice in how you attach to people? What qualities in yourself feel neglected now that they're gone? This isn't about finding answers so much as honoring the questions, giving your obsessive thoughts a container where they can exist without taking over your entire mind. Somatic therapy approaches offer another pathway. Since obsession lives in both mind and body, try placing a hand on your heart and taking 5 slow breaths whenever you notice the thoughts circling. This simple gesture activates your vagus nerve, which researcher Stephen Porges identified as crucial for shifting from fight or flight to rest and digest mode. It tells your nervous system, "I'm here, I'm safe. This feeling will pass." You're not trying to make the thoughts go away. You're creating a physical anchor in the present moment, reminding your body that you can survive this discomfort. Over time, this practice builds what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to feel difficult feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Cognitive behavioral strategies from psychologist Aaron Beck's work can also help. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'll never find anyone like them again," ask, "What's the evidence for and against this thought? Is it 100% true or 80% true? What would you tell a friend who said this?" This isn't positive thinking, it's balanced thinking. You're not denying your pain, you're expanding your perspective beyond the narrow tunnel vision that obsession creates. You might realize that while this relationship had unique qualities, other relationships could offer different but equally valuable experiences. Or that being alone right now, as painful as it feels, is creating space for self-discovery that wouldn't happen otherwise. Rituals of closure, researched by anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, can provide what ambiguous endings lack. Write a letter to your ex saying everything you wish you could say, then burn it, bury it, or put it in a bottle and throw it in water. Or create a small ceremony where you symbolically release the relationship. These acts don't magically erase feelings, but they give your brain the completion it craves. They create a clear before and after marker, helping your nervous system recognize that this chapter has indeed ended. The obsession often persists because your brain doesn't have a definitive, the end moment. Rituals can provide that narrative punctuation. Rebuilding your identity independently is crucial. Social psychologist Hazel Marcus's work on possible selves shows we need visions of who we might become. Make a list. Who are you without this relationship? What interests got sidelined? What friendships need reinvestment? What new skills could you develop? Start small. Read a book in a cafe alone. Take a class in something completely unrelated to your ex. Volunteer somewhere meaningful. Each of these acts is a brick in the foundation of your post-relationship self. The obsession diminishes not when you stop thinking about them, but when you start thinking about yourself, your present self, and your future possibilities. Understand that grief researcher Catherine Shear identifies what she calls complicated grief, when loss gets stuck. If months have passed and the obsession isn't diminishing, Or if it's interfering with your ability to function, consider seeking professional support. A therapist trained in approaches like EMDR or acceptance and commitment therapy can offer tools specifically for processing stuck trauma and intrusive thoughts. There's no shame in needing help navigating this terrain. In fact, it's a sign of self-respect to acknowledge when something is bigger than your current coping resources. Healing isn't a linear process, and everyone's timeline looks different. Notice what your obsession is trying to tell you about your needs. Psychologist Marshall Rosenberg's framework, though we won't name it directly, suggests that behind every persistent feeling is an unmet need. Are you longing for connection? For stability? For being seen and understood? For adventure or passion? The person became associated with meeting those needs, but the needs themselves belong to you. The obsession is like a GPS constantly recalculating route to a destination that no longer exists. Instead of trying to silence the GPS, ask, what destination is it trying to reach? Then explore other routes to get there: friendships, creative projects, self-care practices, community involvement. The need is valid. The former person was just one possible vehicle for meeting it. Practice what psychologist Ellen Langer calls mindful noticing of the present moment. When you're obsessing, you're mentally time traveling either to the past or to an imagined future. Gently bring your attention to what's actually here right now. The feel of your feet on the floor, the sounds in the room, the quality of light through the window. This isn't about escaping your feelings, but about expanding your awareness beyond them. Research shows this practice can reduce rumination by creating psychological distance from painful thoughts. You're not the thought, I miss them. You're the awareness noticing that the thought, I miss them, is arising. This subtle shift can reduce the thought's emotional charge over time. Create what positive psychology researcher Martin Seligman calls positive portfolio of experiences that have nothing to do with your ex. Make a list of moments in the past week when you felt genuinely engaged, connected, or peaceful, even if they were brief. Maybe it was laughing with a coworker, enjoying your morning coffee, getting absorbed in a task. Keep adding to this list daily. This isn't about denying pain, but about widening your emotional aperture. The brain has a negativity bias. It clings to threats for survival. By consciously collecting positive moments, you're training your attention to notice what's working, what's nourishing, what's already here in your life without them. Recognize that obsession often masks fear: fear of being alone, fear of never finding love again, fear of having made the wrong decision. Psychologist Susan David's work on emotional agility suggests welcoming these fears with curiosity rather than resistance. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if this fear came true? And then, what's the best that could happen? And what's most likely? This three-question practice puts fears in perspective. You might realize that even the worst-case scenario is survivable, and that the most likely outcome is neither paradise nor catastrophe, but something human and manageable. The obsession loses its power when the underlying fears are brought into daylight. Implement what neuroscientists call environmental restructuring to reduce triggers. This doesn't mean erasing all evidence of the relationship that can backfire by making it more forbidden and thus more compelling. Instead, researcher by Fogg's behavior design suggests making small environmental tweaks. Change your phone background, rearrange your furniture, take a different route to work, visit new cafes or parks on weekends. These subtle shifts create novelty that disrupts habitual thought patterns. Your brain associates certain environments with certain people. Changing the environment creates new neural pathways not linked to your ex. Over time, these new pathways become the default routes your thoughts travel. Practice gratitude for what the relationship taught you, even if it ended painfully. Research by psychologist Robert Emmons shows gratitude practice can actually rewire how we process difficult experiences. Try writing down 3 things you learned about yourself from that relationship, or 3 ways you grew because of it. This isn't about sugarcoating, it's about extracting meaning from pain, which psychologist Viktor Frankl identified as crucial for resilience. The obsession often focuses on what was lost. Gratitude practice helps you also see what was gained, even if the gains came at a high cost. This balanced perspective reduces the all or nothing thinking that fuels obsession. Set boundaries with your own behavior. Researcher Wendy Wood's work on habits shows that willpower alone rarely works for long-term change. Instead, create implementation intentions, specific if, then plans for when obsessive thoughts arise. For example, If I find myself scrolling through old photos after 10 p.m., then I will close my phone and read a book for 15 minutes. Or, if I start imagining conversations with them during my commute, then I will listen to a podcast or audiobook instead. These pre-decided rules reduce decision fatigue and create new behavioral grooves. The key is to make the alternative action easy, enjoyable, and immediately available. Understand that healing happens in layers, not all at once. Psychologist Julia Adigangi's research on emotional processing shows that we often need to revisit the same pain multiple times, each time at a slightly deeper level. The obsession might lessen, then flare up again around an anniversary, a song, or a passing comment. This isn't regression. It's the natural spiraling nature of healing. Each time you meet the obsession with compassion and curiosity, you integrate a little more of the experience. Think of it like waves washing over a rock. Each wave smooths a different edge, until eventually what was jagged becomes rounded. What was painful becomes part of your landscape rather than a wound. Cultivate what psychologist Dacher Keltner calls experiences, moments that make you feel small in a good way, connected to something larger than yourself. Visit a planetarium and contemplate the cosmos. Walk in an old-growth forest. Watch a thunderstorm from a safe place. Listen to music that gives you chills. Has been shown to reduce self-focused rumination by putting personal concerns in perspective. Your breakup matters, but it's not the only story unfolding in the universe. This isn't about minimizing your pain, but about contextualizing it within a larger tapestry of existence. The obsession, which thrives on narrow focus, naturally loosens its grip when your awareness expands. Remember that your worth isn't defined by being chosen or not chosen by someone else. Psychologist Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion emphasizes that your inherent value exists independent of any relationship status. The obsession sometimes stems from a hidden belief that if you could just understand why they left, or if you could just get them back, you would prove your worth. But worth isn't something to prove, it's something to recognize. You are already whole, already enough, with or without them. This isn't a fluffy affirmation. It's a neurological reality that when you internalize this truth, your brain stops seeking external validation to feel complete. And hey, if you're finding this helpful, hitting that like button really helps this channel reach others who might need to hear this too. Every like tells YouTube's algorithm this is valuable content worth sharing. Finally, consider that the obsession might be protecting you from something even more painful, the emptiness or uncertainty of what comes next. Psychologist Irvin Yalom wrote about how we often prefer known suffering to unknown possibility. Staying mentally connected to your ex, even painfully, can feel safer than facing the blank page of your future. The obsession becomes a familiar companion, however miserable. Recognizing this allows you to gently ask, what would it be like to let go, even just 5%? What tiny step could you take toward creating a future narrative that doesn't include them? The goal isn't to force yourself to stop caring, but to gradually make space for caring about other things too, including your own unfolding story. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear which strategy you found most helpful. Drop a comment below and let's create some community wisdom together. And hey, before you go, there's a 3D game called Inner Phoenix. You walk through it like a quiet temple with rooms for what you're observing, what you're feeling, what you need, and what you might try next. It was made for exactly these moments of transition and self-discovery. No pressure. It's in the description below whenever you're ready. Remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos that might help with whatever comes next on your journey. Having that little bell icon lit up means YouTube will let you know when we explore new ways of navigating difficult emotions and relationships.